It's kind of in a cool little bottle, very similar to the Willet, where it has like a very skinny shaft and then it comes down at the bottom.
I know a lot about that, actually.
I knew I shouldn't have explained that shit.
That's perfect.
Just fucking.
There's no way I'm cutting that, so just play off it. Yo, welcome into the show. I'm Ryan O'Leary.
And I'm Mike Zika.
And this is the Bourbon Playbook, just another
podcast in the basement.
Yeah, excited to get into this week's bottle, man. We're going vintage speakeasy style, I would say. You've brought me yet another bottle I've never heard of, Zika, and I appreciate that, my man. I really do appreciate it, and I'm excited. I hope the listeners are too. Just full disclosure to the listeners, speaking of y'all, thank you. Thank you for joining us each week. Spread the word. This is a very organic grassroots effort, right, Zika? Would you agree with that?
100%.
Getting the word out. A lot of friends and family, and it's kind of extending from there. We appreciate you. Tell a friend, subscribe, leave us a review. Hopefully it's a good one. If it's bad, whatever, just leave it anyway. We'll take all the reviews. We'll take all the love. That's how you can give back to us, and we appreciate you. And let me just say Happy New Year to you all. So I think this episode will publish sometime in early January. Zika, to you, I should say Happy Thanksgiving, because we've actually in real life been on a little bit of a break and are now back on the mic the week after the Turkey Day holiday. So we're not exactly in the same timeline as far as like when we're recording and when episodes are publishing. So again, to the listeners, Happy New Year, Happy 2025. To you, Zika, Happy Thanksgiving.
I appreciate it, man. Let the balls drop.
Now you kids go down there and find my nuts.
Yeah. Oh my God. That could be an all-timer right there. Let the balls drop. I am with you. Before we get into the pour, I wanted to throw something at you real quick.
Hit me.
I was back home. One of my best homeboys. Shout out to Timmy, friend of the pod. I know he's been listening each week.
Let's go, Tim.
We appreciate you. He hosted a little get-together while I was back in town. I really appreciated it. Got some people together that I haven't seen in a while. And he busted out a little guilty pleasure.
Ooh.
I wanted to see if you've ever had this whiskey. This isn't exactly a bourbon, so I think I'm cheating a little bit.
Go on.
You could tell me if it's a whiskey or a bourbon. Something I've never tried, the Crown Royal Peach.
Ooh. Yeah, it's funny because if you're from all my Iowa friends, especially one of my buddies, Brennan, absolutely loves Crown Peach. So it's a Canadian whiskey. It's fantastic. It's a great mixer. A lot of people actually drink it on the rocks.
This is how Tim
like at a bar.
Yeah.
They'll mosey up to the bar and they'll be like, I'll take a Crown Peach on the rocks, or even neat sometimes. So respect.
I know you like it sweet, right?
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you would like that kind of whiskey on the rocks.
Yeah, I've had it. It's definitely something. I think it's more of like a flavored whiskey. It's not something that's finished in a cask barrel, right? I don't know what additives they actually add to it. That kind of scares me a little bit.
I was going to say, for me, it's like a one finger pour. It was like perfect for a finger. I don't know if I want to get to two fingers with the Crown Peach, but one finger, it was kind of delightful.
Yeah, I have no qualms against it, man. It's a decent pour for, given the occasion. So
one of my other homeboys, Big Man, was in the house. He's a big bourbon guy. So for Tim to pull out the Crown Peach in front of Big Man, I thought was definitely, like, on the E5 scale, it was definitely not an impress your guest move, right? You're not impressing your guests with the peach. I was a little surprised he pulled it out, to be honest with you, to say, hey boys, check out the Crown Peach, right? But it was good. Shout out again to Tim. Thanks for listening, man. Love you, buddy. Sorry to call you out with the peach juice there, but it was good, and it was bold to bring it out.
We respect the vulnerability, Tim, and that's what's most important. All right, buddy.
We do. This is a bourbon podcast, though, Zika. So you were getting into your pour of the week. Why don't you go ahead and give it to us?
Yeah. So my pour of the week comes with a side of turkey and touchdowns because it's Thanksgiving at Aunt Amy's, right? And this is an event that happens once a year. But let me tell you a little bit about my Aunt Amy, right? So she's the quote unquote CEO of the Cougar Club, right? All of her little friends. Northfield, Minnesota, a title that she wears with pride for sure. So picture this. She's the typical Mary Kay, pink Cadillac, fur coats. She screams bougie enough to make Liberace jealous. Let's put it that way. So she's basically charisma on heels, married to one of the wittiest guys I know, my Uncle Steve. I mean, 2 peas in a pod. And ultimately their Thanksgiving dinner is basically the Super Bowl of potlucks, right? It's the closest thing that I can explain to like a Great Gatsby party that I'll ever be a part of, minus the flappers and bootlegging. The rules for this are simple, right? It's like you show up with a dish to pass around the noon hour, or in my case, you kind of roll in around, 2, sometimes 3 o'clock with a charming or witty excuse, right? Unfortunately, that's kind of how it rolls out for me. And ultimately the guest list is like every aunt, uncle, cousin, and it feels like half the town of Northfield, Minnesota is in attendance here. And the food spread is ridiculous, right? It's, you walk in directly from the patio, the sliding door that seems to never close because people are in and out all the time. And it's literally 20 feet of every type of protein, carb, and casserole that you can think of. Plus there's a center island of desserts, pot stickers, meatballs, cheese trays, you name it, on and on, right? The one thing that I want to highlight, though, that always kind of is near to and dear to my heart is ultimately the Turkey Bowl. So what the Turkey Bowl is an annual football game. It's flag football. So imagine this. You have a bunch of old gym class heroes like myself, my cousins that are, questionable when it comes to athletic ability, and a handful of Northfield High's finest athletes from the mid 2000s, right?
Real quick here. It was cold as shit on Thanksgiving here, wasn't it? I mean, I wasn't in town. I was traveling with family myself, but like, wasn't it like below 20 degrees?
It was freezing.
Okay, go on.
And I will,
you guys are crazy.
Before you spoil the porridge, I'm going to explain that in a minute.
Okay,
here.
Sorry. I got ahead of you there. Sorry. Go on.
Fair question. It's basically the young bucks versus the veterans. And we either play it up the hill from Amy's house and St. Olaf, the college football, where it's really nice. It's turf. Sometimes it has snow on it. Or we rent out a local dome that's in Northfield, and we all just kind of travel there. And it really just depends on how Mother Nature decides to present herself for the holiday. So this year we actually did it in the dome, okay. Right? So we didn't brave the weather. We're not that tough. We're getting old. These joints, man, they're clicking.
No, you can't.
You know what I mean? You wake up, you're trying to touch your toes. It's not a pretty sight. A lot of lactic acid buildup for sure. But ultimately, the scene is, I mean, you get there, the wives, the aunts, the kids, they all sit in the stands and kind of heckle us or, cheer for us, depending on how many points the old guys manage to put up, like myself.
The crowd to their feet for what should be the big play of the game. Aunt Amy back to pass. Throws the out route to the sideline. She's got Zika. The crowd goes wild as Zika breaks a tackle. Oh, he looked like he pulled a hammy, but he's still moving all the way to the 20, inside the 10, touchdown.
But it's one day a year that we honestly just get to pretend that, we've still got it. Maybe pulling a hamstring or quad or, talking smack, but ultimately we're honestly just having a blast. It's just the one time that we're still relevant to not only ourselves and our confidence, but our wives and our family,
I love you!
I love you! Joni loves Chachi!
Even if we're a little bit past our prime, let's be honest. But the kicker is after the game, when all the cramping and the pulled hamstrings and calves and all that lactic acid built up and all that resides, we go back and what do you think we do, Ryan?
I'm gonna guess Zika rolled in at 2 or 3 p.m. with a dessert bourbon. Ooh. That we're now gonna pour. That would be my guess. Was it Crown Peach?
Not close. Oh. Not even a little bit.
Sorry, Tim.
Anytime that I feel that I've been in a situation where I've put it all out on the line every single year, I think at the end of the day, I deserve this. Damn it. I earned it. Right. So by the time I get back hanging out with the family, breaking out a couple nice bottles of bourbon, breaking out the euchre, the jokes are flying, it's a great way to spend your time. So this week I just wanted to pour out another pour to yet another year of gridiron glory, family, friends, and Aunt Amy's incredible feast.
I like that. Cheers to Aunt Amy and the crew. I was over at the Budman's Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Missed that the last couple of years, so it was good to be back in New Hampshire for that. My dad's a wild man. It's a kegger, multiple turkeys. He cooks like this crazy amount of food. There's always so many people there, and it's not a potluck. He does it all himself. And how he always has enough food for everyone who shows up, and it's usually like over 30 people.
Wow.
I don't know how he does it. He actually was talking about this being his last year. I think he said
no.
I think he said he's getting too old for it, and maybe he is. But no, it was a good trip. But my story isn't about the trip home for Thanksgiving. It's more about me traveling with a potty training toddler. I have a 3-year-old. I think I've talked about my son, Julian. We call him Jules.
AKA Spider-Man.
Spider-Man. That's right. And I think this story might hit our demographic because I just have a feeling that adults with young children probably drink more bourbon. I'm totally making that up.
I think you're right.
I know my toddler makes me want to drink a lot more bourbon, and I'll tell you why. So we're at the point right now with him where he is basically done with diapers, which is amazing. He just turned 3. He's only been 3 for like a month. And for him, he's literally sleeping through the night we put a diaper on him at night, but he's sleeping through the night without going in his pants, which is awesome.
It's a win.
And literally on this trip, he started pooping in the potty pretty regularly. He didn't have a lot of accidents. He's been pooping in the potty. He's been peeing in the potty.
Hell yeah, been there.
Everything's great. So you've been there. So all's good. We're almost done with diapers, right? There's just this one thing with toddlers, and they'll just get something in their head and they can't let it go. And for my kid, it is that he is scared of the toilets in the public restrooms, right? They're too loud. They're too busy. They're too disgusting,
To be fair, so am I, Ryan.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Let's be honest.
But you would say this, right? In terms of airports, for me, coming from my hometown, I used to travel through Boston Logan Airport. That airport blows. It's the worst airport. And just trying to bring him into one of those stalls, it was open the door, floater. Nope. Open another door, clearly clogged. Nope. Yeah. Disgusting. Open the next one. Oh, there's someone in here who didn't lock the door. Awesome. You know what I mean? It's just an absolute chaos at Logan.
Can I find a clean seat around here?
You get to MSP, Minneapolis, St. Paul. It is you said bougie.
Ritz-Carlton.
You said bougie earlier.
Yeah.
It's marble floors and everything's clean and sparkling. It was that airport is next level, man. It's part of the reason I moved here.
Yeah.
Nice. So for me, it's as a dad, I'm bro, you're not gonna be scared of it. I understand if you're scared of the Logan bathrooms, but you're not gonna be scared of MSP. But basically we got back to Minneapolis from the flight from Boston. It was about almost a 3-hour flight. He peed before we left. He didn't pee on the flight at all. He didn't pee in his pants. I know he's got to go. Clearly, you got to go. After that, I had to go. My wife had to go. I know he does too. He kept telling us that he didn't want to go. You could tell he was kind of losing it after a travel day. We get all the way to baggage claim. We get our bags, and we're all right, point of no return. Are we going to put this kid in the car without him going to the bathroom? Because we don't have any diapers. Or are we just going to try to get him to go? And my decision, wrongly, as I'm sure people with 3-year-olds, 2-year-olds, 4-year-olds, whatever, are probably nodding along right now listening. I made the wrong decision to say, even though you're being defiant, I'm going to just try to get you to do it anyway, right? So I bring him into the bathroom. I bring him into a stall, shut the door, and he's just not having it. And he's screaming and he's yelling, and I'm taking his pants off and I'm trying to get him on the toilet. I'm like, bro, we're going to get this done. Let's go. And he starts doing something that just started happening recently, and it's really annoying, and it actually drives me crazy. He started punching me in the face.
Oh.
My 3-year-old literally kicks my ass.
What the hell are you doing? I'm kicking my ass! Do you mind?
he literally punches me in the face, Zika. And I don't know how to handle this. I'm like, is there a book I can read on what to do? Because I'm just literally, if you can picture this, in a stall, being calm as hell, getting screamed at by my 3-year-old, clawed, punched, and just he's yelling bloody murder. And I'm literally worried, okay, they're going to call the police and send them in here into the bathroom because there's something going on in the stall.
Yeah.
It was a horror show. It didn't last that long because I gave up. And I just dragged him out of there and said, and I was in a huff too. I was kind of pissed at this whole situation, had gotten punched in the face like 10 times. And it's just like, put yourself in my shoes right now as a non-parent, right? Because my wife and I were almost non-parents. We're both about 40 years old now. We almost didn't have kids. We decided late to have one kid. And it was a great decision. I love my son. Sorry, Jules, if you're listening to this down the road. I do love you, man. But this was a tough day. What would you do if your 3-year-old just started slugging you in the face? Like, what would you do?
Woof. That's a loaded question, Ryan. Man, from what you described, all I can think of is like WCW cage match, right? It's like Kane versus Undertaker.
We're in an enclosed stall with the door locked. And I have his like diaper bag, which takes up some room, and you have a toilet, and there's not a lot of space in here. And like, I'm protecting myself, but he's landing some shots and they don't hurt. And you almost want to laugh because it's like, there's not like a lot of force behind these shots. You know what I mean? Yeah. He doesn't really have muscles yet, but it's like, dude, my son is like closed hand punching me in the face. Like, this is not okay. This is not appropriate behavior, but he's so pissed and doesn't know how to control his emotions that like, I don't know how to deal with it. And for me, it's like, I can't help but think about like, if I threw my hands at the Budman when I was a kid, like what would have happened back in 1985? You know what I mean? Like,
I can tell you what.
Probably would have got a brush to the head or something. You know what I mean? Like, probably would have got something.
The paddle or the belt, man.
Yeah.
Get to your room. It's like, oh shit, I know what that means.
It would have been really stern, right? I don't know if like the 80s where like you were getting the paddle there. I know that was probably a little bit earlier. In 2024, you don't do that shit. 2025 to our folks that are listening now.
Yeah.
Again, Happy New Year. You just don't do that. I think dads are more involved nowadays than they were back in the day. It's more of like a tandem thing with your wife, right? Like my wife and I do everything 50-50 as much as possible.
Nice.
And I'm super involved, and I don't know how to handle this. This is not a situation where I'm like, you deal with it, honey. I'm going to work. You know what I mean? You have to, like, I'm in it, getting punched in the face and trying to figure out, like, I need to like research a book or something. And literally I have a book that I think my wife ordered that's on. She asked me, do you want the audio book or the hard copy? We're driving home from the airport. I'm like, give me the hard copy. I'm still too old school for the audio book. I want to read this shit. I want to really
feel it.
I want to be on my couch with a bourbon reading this book. So pour it out for Jules, man. He landed some good shots in that stall. Didn't cut me. No, it was kind of like that Mike Tyson, Jake Paul fight. Like there was no cuts, no bruises. Kind of wasn't a real fight.
Yeah.
But I came out of that night feeling like I did not know what I was doing. And, you know, then a day goes by and you just realized your kid was like really tired and didn't know how to express himself. And he's expressing it by, you know, slugging it out. So look out, folks. I might have a little Mike Tyson on my hands.
Yeah, man. That's, man, what a blunder. I wouldn't know what to do, you know? And I think that's fatherhood 101.
And that's the point. You could just morph into my space and you would know about as much as me. And that's with 3 years on the job. I don't know what to do. Like, you know, and you wouldn't either. And that's just how parenting is. They give you this kid and this little baby and you leave the hospital and you're like, fuck. Like, the nurses don't come with us. Like, we just got to figure this out from here on. Okay. All right, fine.
You're the keys.
Yeah. And 3 years later, man, it's crazy that I still, sometimes I feel just like I did leaving the hospital, like 2 days after he was born. Right. I still feel that, like, man, I really don't know what the hell I'm doing here. You know what I mean? It's tough. So yeah, I mean, definitely on that car ride home, needed some brown juice. Like I actually listened to the Wild Turkey episode of the Bourbon Playbook on the way home.
Just kind of talk yourself down a little bit.
And it calmed me down a little bit. I'm just like, I need a bourbon, but I'm in the car and there's no bourbon handy. So I listened to the playbook. So yeah, man.
Well, hey, man, I'm
Thank
glad.
God for bourbon, though.
Yeah. I'm glad you're able to find your zen in the Bourbon Playbook. So pour it up, man.
We could get my wife down here, get her on the mic. She would tell you how pissed I was, man. I was not in a good headspace after that. It was tough, but
I'd love to see a pissed off Ryan.
Yeah, I know. It takes a lot. It takes a lot, but man, I turned into the Grinch real fast.
All right, Ryan. So bourbon of the week.
Yeah, let's get it.
Let's hit the spotlight. So Old Forester 1920. So this week's pour is a powerhouse for sure. So it's a blend of barrels that are aged to a specific proof to replicate the style of whiskey produced during the Prohibition era, right? So let's kind of dive into that and really unpackage that, right? So a couple accolades. This whiskey in general, gold medal winner, San Francisco World Spirits Competition, consistently ranked among the top bourbons by whiskey enthusiasts and critics alike all over. So time for a little history lesson, Ryan. What do you say, man?
Oh, it's the best part of the show. Let's go. Come on, Zika. Teach us, man. Teach us something.
All right, here we go. So the history of Old Forester Distillery. So truly a pioneer of innovation. The head distiller, George Garvin Brown.
Garvey,
Big G, was the original quality control freak, one might say, as he was the actual first person to sell his bourbon in glass bottles to ensure that customers got exactly what they paid for. And it was based off the consistency in every sip, right? So previous to this is crazy. They used to sell, bourbon in ceramic or stoneware jugs or metal cans and flasks, right? But the Brown family is still in ownership of this distillery to this day. Now, kind of moving forward a little bit of how it got its name and the era in general. So during Prohibition, Old Forester became the bourbon of choice for, guess what?
medicinal marijuana / bourbon.
Hey, medical emergencies. Close, Ryan.
Okay.
But it is named after Dr. William Forster. That's how it got its name. So, hey, listen, if you got a headache, a broken heart, maybe you're just bored, guess what? Your doctor's prescription had you covered, right? Yet again.
I prescribe you the sweet brown juice.
The brown juice.
This will make you feel great. I mean, what the fuck would bourbon cure? You know what I mean? Like it'd make you feel good for a few hours.
Apparently a lot in the 1920s.
Yeah, in the 1920s, it's like, this is great. Like, yeah, could you imagine that? Like, was alcohol, like, were people just slugging it back in the 1920s?
Oh, I'd assume, man.
Yeah.
Well, you gotta remember they're buying all this snake oil from all these other doctors.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, when it comes to their C. difficile or, any major intestinal issues or stomach problems, and, obviously the snake oil's not working, you get a little brown juice in you, you're feeling good, at least for the time being. There you go.
Yep. Makes sense.
So tragedy struck, not once, but
Twice?
twice. Exactly. So in 1910, a fire forced them to actually relocate all their bourbon and rebarrel it, accidentally creating the double-barreled masterpiece. So a disaster turned delicious. So this inspired the release of the Old Forester 1910, which is actually now a part of the Whiskey Row series. And a pro tip, actually, I was just talking to my bourbon buddy Josh. He said, if you take a 1920 and you take a 1910, so those are two different bottles. We're covering the 1920 right now. And you let it sit for a few months. If you combine them 50-50, the mashup with the cinnamon spice from the 1920 and the chocolate malt from the 1910 will blow your mind. He said It's excellent.
All right. Can you just put yourself into this time? Let's put ourselves into the time of the 1910s.
Time travel. Let's do it.
That would be something.
Yeah.
Let's go back to that time.
Flappers and bootlegging, man.
A fire breaks out and you're forced to rebarrel your bourbon. If you're like running a distillery at this time, you'd be freaking the fuck out, right?
Yeah.
Like you're like, holy shit, like this is like a farmer. My crop is ruined, right? Like, do you think they knew that this would end up being like what we're now drinking, like a masterpiece? Or do you think they thought they were screwed? Because for me, if I was these people in this distillery, I'd be like, we just lost our juice. Like, we're fucked. We're gonna have to start over.
Such a great point, right? I mean,
Thank you.
Yeah. Point taken.
I do take a compliment well. Go on. Go on. I'm known for that, actually.
But yeah, man, I mean, it's a situation where, I mean, it's your bread and butter, right? It's your small business, and you go bankrupt. and you're not reaching out to an insurance firm, a collector, and being like, hey, this just happened. What are the next steps? Right.
No, it's 1910.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what you're doing.
You're riding the horse and buggy
Yeah.
to rebarrel your fucking bourbon.
Yeah.
What are you doing? I would like to know like exactly how they went about doing that. Did they have to rescue their barrels from a fire? You know what I mean? Like I feel like this could get really dramatic.
Honestly, you know what I see? I see in my mind, I see these guys seeing that their rick house caught on fire, ringing the bell.
And just salvaging whatever they could.
Like the British are coming.
Yeah.
And the entire town comes, and all the kids, all the way from, ages 5 to 10 to full grown adults, everybody's just in this massive area, in the rick house, just rolling these barrels just to safety. Some of them are on fire. Cats are dying. It's
crazy. Like saving the orphans from the fire.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's
you're diving in there for the barrels.
Complete chaos.
We can't lose the barrels.
We can't. We're willing to sacrifice a couple, young bucks to the whole chaos and the scenario, but ultimately you're going to come out ahead because you just created one of the best bourbons that's still today, the 1910, based off the double barreling aspect of the process.
You're teasing me, man. We haven't tried it yet. It's sitting here on my desk.
Correct. This is the 1920.
Yeah.
We're talking about the 1910, but
sorry,
we'll get to that one too.
Okay, go on.
So fire strikes again, as I said, not once, but
twice.
There you go. In 2015, Old Forester rose again from the ashes, opening a new distillery in 2018. So this is kind of the big pivotal point for them as they returned to Whiskey Row, which is it's a reclaimed spot in Louisville, very historic Whiskey Row, becoming the first distillery to move back there since Prohibition. So what Whiskey Row is think about like the Disneyland for bourbon lovers, right? I got a picture there for you, Ryan, if you can see it, but it's literally one long stretch. Think of it as downtown Minneapolis, Washington. If you're trying to go grab some grub, there's food on every side of the street. There's bars, restaurants. It's a great place to be, right? I mean, you got Old Forester, 3 blocks down. You got Evan Williams, followed by Michter's, Angel's Envy, Peerless. I mean, there's so many distilleries within literally 8 blocks, right?
That's awesome.
So it's the return of Whiskey Row, which is kind of cool, right? They kind of triumph out of that. So the name of Old Forester 1920, how it came about, it's actually named after the year Prohibition began. So the high proof reflects the strength of the bourbon produced during Prohibition, when whiskey was bottled at 100 proof and aged to a higher proof around 115, for instance, this one, due to the Angel's share. You'll hear that sometimes. Angel's share refers to the portion of whiskey that evaporates from the barrel during the aging process.
Huh.
Another unique shout out, they actually every year, every September 2nd, they release a birthday bourbon in honor of George Garvin Brown's birthday. So if you ever heard of the birthday bourbon, it's kind of in a cool little bottle, very similar to the Willet, where it has like a very skinny shaft and then it comes down at the bottom.
I know a lot about that, actually.
Ooh, doggy, we got a party now.
So I've actually had it once with my buddy Nick. It's cinnamon, apple, dark chocolate, oak bomb. It's very long finished, full bodied bourbon. It's fantastic. It's very, very sought after within the bourbon community.
Hard to find.
Very hard to find. Yeah. Very hard to find. And it goes for hundreds of dollars on the secondary market. It's ridiculous, the markup on it, but it is a fantastic pour. Other than that, just one other thing to mention. I know typically they mention a little bit about their consistency and flavoring and how they achieve this. So they actually extend their fermentation process for up to 7 days. So typically the bourbon is fermented roughly about 48 to 72 hours, but Old Forester takes a little bit of a different approach, up to 7 days, because good things take time. But ultimately, they also use a heat-cycled warehouse as well to kind of achieve that spicy flavor, hints of the citrus and caramel within their bourbon making process. But the legacy of every bottle, honestly, is Old Forester is more than just a bourbon. It's something that kind of blends history with craftsmanship with, the timeless pour in general. So it's a fantastic pour that I think everyone will love, and I'm excited to kind of dive into this. So all that said, if you're still with me, you thirsty yet, Ryan?
Let's pop it.
Let's do it. All right, on the nose, what do we got?
Citrusy.
It does have a hint of that citrus. Definitely can.
I catch that on the nose.
Yeah. A little bit of caramel.
This is something I'm learning now as we've gone on through the pod, like sticking your nose in the Glencairn, but then breathing through your mouth.
Yeah.
You definitely catch. It's amazing that you catch different notes that way.
It opens it up and definitely, work both nostrils. And I get, I know toasted marshmallow sometimes comes off as, from my understanding and from my palate, when I smell this specific kind of toasted smell, it typically leads to like a cinnamon finish in the bourbon when I try it.
You are.
You get any of that?
No, you're getting a fucking s'more when you're sticking your nose in that thing.
Oh.
I'm not getting a s'more.
It's my favorite sweet treat.
I stick my nose into the Old Forester, and I get these like pleasing hits of citrus, and for sure, I get that's like a dominating. I get the citrusy, fruity smell. When I breathe it in through the mouth with my nose in the Glencairn, it feels hot to me. I'm getting the spice a little bit more.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Definitely, dried cherries. I get a little toasted marshmallow,
Toasted
caramel
marshmallow.
oak. One of the best.
It's a nice smelling bourbon, man. I'm excited. Am I allowed to sip it yet? Should I do the Kentucky Chew?
Let's do it. Let's chew it up. Got a little heat on it, huh?
That is a spicy meatball. That was a spicy chew.
And again, it's higher proof. It's going to be a longer finish. You can taste it on the front of your tongue, and it's still finishing on the back, at least for me.
It's still sitting on my gums right now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Correct me if I'm wrong. More fruity notes up front, and then like it finishes with like a more, I don't know if that's what you're talking about with the toasted, what was it? Toasted marshmallow.
Mm-hmm.
There's something, I can't peg what it is. I got to take another sip, but it's like a sweeter start and then a toasty finish for me.
And for me, that's cinnamon. Now I get cinnamon on the back. So you're exactly right. Typically, it's going to be sweeter on the front of your tongue, front of your palate. And then as it moves back to the side of your tongue, it's going to be more of those spices, especially a rye. Like when you're drinking a rye, not that I ever drink ryes, but when I do, if I ever had to, that's kind of how it finishes.
How did you discover 1920? Was this your bourbon group, or is this something you just wanted to try? Or
actually, my old director Greg bought it for one of my other coworkers for his birthday. And Old Forester is something you always see on the shelf, right? You always see it, and you're like, hey, that looks cool. The marketing, it looks old, but something nostalgic that I wouldn't mind putting in my bourbon cabinet. All the bottles line up nice. They have all different colors depending on, what collection you're looking for. But ultimately it was one that I tried that I was like, wow, for $50-$60, like this is something that's very complex and something delicious that I love. And it's kind of that category of when I have somebody over and I'm like, hey, what are you looking for? You want to try some bourbons? Awesome. You're looking for something more, a dessert bourbon, something more like brown sugar, chocolate malt based. You want something more cinnamon based. You want something more sweeter. You want cherry forward. You want apple forward. There's a lot of different bourbons that I like to offer my guests depending on, what their palate typically is. And for me, this one is, I'll ask, I have an Old Forester 100 as well. That's fantastic. And I'll always ask them like, hey, do you like, cinnamon forward bourbons, spicy cinnamon forward bourbons? And if the answer is yes, I'm digging into my Old Forester every time. It's something you can find on the shelf. It's stupid not to have it in your collection if you're just going out there buying a bunch of random bottles. And I think this is a perfect fit for the pod based off the proof, the finish, and kind of where we're at in the podcast.
Would you bring this to Aunt Amy's as a dessert bourbon?
Every day of the week, man.
Yeah. I feel like this would be a good post-turkey bowl sip.
You gotta anticipate that rush. Cool. No, of course I do. Of course, you did a great job.
What happened, Toast?
I think he's on steroids. It's like trying to cover a fucking racehorse.
Absolutely. And I believe that's actually when I opened it.
At Aunt Amy's.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So on the aging statement for this bottle of Old Forester 1920, there's actually no age statement, but it's crafted to kind of mimic Prohibition era style whiskey.
Does that mean they just light the building on fire? and they try to like mimic that whole process of like, oh shit, we got to rescue the barrels and rebarrel this shit. Like, is that what you're talking about?
Great question. And I wish I knew the answer to that, but I will say there's 3 different ways that they used to distill whiskey back in Prohibition when it was illegal. They bootlegged it, right? So it was illegally manufactured, produced in secret distilleries. Typically, that's where you hear your moonshine term from.
Sure.
They smuggled the whiskey. So it was smuggled from, into the U.S. from countries like Canada or the Caribbean or even Scotland. And then my favorite is the bathtub whiskey. So it's literally homemade concoctions made in small batches, often very dangerous and unregulated. So
like literally in the tub?
Literally in the tub.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Again, going back to my 3-year-old, I wouldn't drink anything that's in that freaking tub right now, man. He likes, going back to the toddler potty training.
Yeah.
Kid just rips it right. Every time he gets in the tub, he just rips it.
Let it rip.
He just lets it rip. So like, I can't, like if I'm drawing a bath for him, I can't plug it until he's done pissing when he gets in that tub. He's going to let it rip as soon as he gets there. He's like, he just like pees over everything, his toys, whatever's in there. I'm like, God, let's rinse all this off. And now we can plug the drain. So yeah, making bourbon in the bathtub, like that's the only tub I have in my house, man.
I don't think
That'd
they
be tough.
showered a lot back then either, though. You know what I mean? It was kind of like bourbon or you take a shower.
Yeah.
And back then I don't think anyone really gave a shit. So
They definitely didn't let their kids punch them in the face back then.
yeah, I mean, I'm sure it happened.
They probably just sent their kids, like put them on a horse and like sent them away. If they punched them, it's like, you punched dad, bye.
Go to your Aunt Karen's.
Yeah,
Jump on this.
You're going down this dirt road, and where you end up, nobody knows. I got to distill some bourbon.
Next thing you know, he's like the king of France or something. And when it comes to the mash bill, we're looking at roughly about 72% corn, 18% rye, and 10% malted barley, kind of giving that sweet and spicy notes all together, and it finishes out this delicious bourbon. So, I mean, looking at this on the E5 scale, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
So again, the E5 scale, where does it rank? The E5 scale consists of 5 things: your daily dram, impress my guests, budget blend, Saturday night sipper, or precious pour. Ryan, where do you think this lands, man?
Not the precious pour, because you told me it was in like the $60 range on the shelf, right?
Correct.
Okay, so I wouldn't think it falls in the precious pour. Daily dram, I mean, in O'Leary's world, that Crown Peach was more of a daily dram than this.
Okay.
I mean, this is not something I could. If I did a 2-finger pour of Old Forester 1920, I wouldn't be able to get through my workday, man. I'd be in the sauce, baby. Like, I'm feeling it right now. So, no, this is good. It's a little too strong though. It's a little bit too kicky for a daily dram, I think. Would you agree? Too
Yes.
bold, right? It's just too much. It's a little bit too much of a kick.
Absolutely. Plus the price point's a little bit higher than I would want for a daily dram.
Mm-hmm.
Plus it's 115 proof. And again, folks, I don't drink every day, right? But I know some people do, which is fine.
Just most days.
I don't judge. Yeah.
Let me ask you this. Is this an impress my guests? Like, is Old Forester, like, does that resonate with people enough where if you have guests come over for, like, say you had one of your Timberwolves parties, or we could talk about the Minnesota Vikings, who are 10-2 right now.
Respect.
Unbelievable, by the way. I don't know if I rolled up into your house for a party pre-podcast before I started learning about this shit, Old Forester, like, would that resonate with me? If you pulled that out, would I be impressed? I'd be like, ooh, thanks, Mike. You're pulling out the old, something the old man would have in the cabinet, Old Forester, that's what, it gives you that vibe, you know what I mean? Like, does this fall into the impress my guest category?
Not right away. What I would recommend is breaking this bottle out to somebody that does enjoy bourbon, that knows a little bit about bourbon, that can maybe understand tasting notes, that knows what a Glencairn is.
So impress certain guests.
Correct.
Yeah.
More
impress the right guest.
Yeah, more your bourbon enthusiasts, right?
Yeah.
Or people that are trying to get into it.
Yeah.
Because I guarantee, oh yeah, I've seen that label, right? Like, I've been around that. I've just never bought a bottle. And to be fair, and in all transparency, 5-6 years into this, I've seen this bottle on the shelf for 5 or 6 years, right? But I've never bought it until just recently. And I think the thing is because it's on the shelf, you just walk right past it because you're always looking for the Eagle Rare, the Buffalo Trace, the Wellers,
Sure.
like insert any allocated bourbon here.
I mean, it's a cool bottle because, it's hard to miss the 1920, right? It's like kind of bold in the middle of the label, and it's got this like teal lettering on it that says Prohibition Style. So you like see the 1920, then you see Prohibition Style, and it does like, it's an intriguing bottle, right? It's like, it's not a flashy bourbon, right? It's not like you're going to bring this bottle out and it's like a bottle of Blanton's with the stopper on top, right? Like that's obviously going to impress your guests.
Correct.
And they've heard of Blanton's. Like it's more impressive when you're walking down the aisle and you see it and you're like, Prohibition Style. And it's almost like gets your wheels turned. It's like, what the fuck is that? What does that mean, right? It makes you wonder, like, what is a Prohibition Style 1920 bourbon taste like? And it makes you want to pull it off the shelf. So it's excellent marketing, I guess I should say, by Old Forester.
Absolutely. It's definitely it's a sneaky one.
Yeah.
Right. It's one of those where I would break this out to somebody that's like, hey, yeah, like my cousin Jack always comes over and he always wants something on ice, right? And I'll break something out like this and see if he likes it. And I usually won't even tell him what it is, right? Until we start drinking a little bit more. But this is one that, it's 115 proof. I'm typically going to serve this with an ice cube for somebody that doesn't drink bourbon quite frequently.
I should have had an ice cube.
Right. Yeah.
I'm on cloud 9 right now.
Yeah. It's something that'll do that to you. But this bourbon in general is something that's great to break out at parties or just, any occasion really that you have somebody over that truly enjoys bourbon, just because it's very unique. And I feel like a lot of people will bypass it on the shelf just because it's easily accessible and it's not an allocated bourbon, but it's fantastic.
It is good.
And I think that's what I really want our listeners to know is sometimes a really good bourbon is sitting right in front of you and you don't have to dive into the FOMO of, different types of Buffalo Trace products or Heaven Hill products that hit the shelf. You have some good bottles right in front of you. So definitely, go to your Total Wine and try to, get as many samples as you can to see if you can find another Old Forester that's just sitting on the shelf that you might not know that you love, right, at the end of the day.
So not the daily dram. It's not a budget blend. It's too expensive. It's not a precious pour. It's not expensive enough. Impress my guest or Saturday night sipper, Zika. What do you got?
So if I had my bourbon group coming over for the night, we got Matt, Jake, Josh, and Nick. This is something that I would break out. So it's not necessarily impress your guests for them by any means, but it is something that's delicious. I guarantee they have this in their bourbon portfolio.
They wouldn't turn it away.
If you will. Exactly. But if we had a tasting, like an Old Forester single barrel tasting night, I might throw this into a blind and just see kind of what they think about it versus some of the store picks that Old Forester's coming out with, which are delicious. But I would probably throw this under Saturday Night Sipper. I just think it's at $60. It's impress your guests. There's nothing. I look at the bottle and I'm like, it's cool. The Prohibition Style you mentioned, love it. It's awesome. But it's something that everyone's walked past on the shelf and they're like, meh, you know what I mean? So it's like, it's something that I want to break out myself on a Saturday night and enjoy it with whoever's with me, because I know that if I love it, more than likely they're going to love it if they're, similar to my, palate. So I would consider this a Saturday night sipper.
I agree with you 100%. I don't have any qualms. Usually I argue with you about the E5 scale. I don't know why. I'm very passionate about the E5.
Hey, the fact that you agreed to that, I'll take it.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Bourbon Playbook. Old Forester 1920. Whew. Proved that even during Prohibition, people found a way to make great bourbon because laws are temporary, fires are fire, but whiskey is forever.
And until next time, keep sipping, keep laughing, and let's be honest, never trust a friend who drinks light beer. Joe Samuels.
In Joe's defense, though, Zika, there's Miller Lights all over the desk right here. That's your beer your sipping beer of choice during the Bourbon Playbook.
And in my defense, I'm a Scotty boy at heart.
Fair enough, man. Cheers.
Cheers.